Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Music Production Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Funk, and I make music as AfroDJMac. And today, I'm having a conversation with Dan Carr, who runs the site ReverbMachine.com. What's up, Dan?
Hi, Brian. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, thanks a lot for taking the time to do this.
No problem.
We're all busy people, right? So
yeah,
I do appreciate you taking some time to sit down and talk.
No problem. Been looking forward to this.
Yeah, so your site, Reverb Machine, is for anyone that's not familiar, you should, if you're listening to this podcast, you're going to love it. It's does a lot with like dissecting music and talking about the gear that's used and recreating the patches and stuff. So I think anyone that's into anything like sound design related or synthesizer programming is going to really enjoy it.
Thank you. I think it's kind of the nerdy side of me that kind of really likes doing. I think initially it was for myself. Now it's kind of a little bit bigger. It's kind of, obviously I get requests and I try and do stuff that other people want to see, stuff that might be popular. But at first it was definitely just kind of me scratching that kind of really nerdy itch I have to really want to listen to a sound and know exactly what it is, where it came from, what's the story behind it, you know?
Yeah. No, I have that same itch all the time. And I'm glad you're scratching it because some of the bands and some of the songs you dissect are songs I love. And it's always fun. And sometimes I get this mixture feeling of like an empowerment and sort of like I could have done that. When you find out like, they're using like some of the tools like, I've got sitting around and they're doing all this amazing stuff with it.
Yeah, definitely. It's every time there's a sound and I've kind of committed to, right, I'm going to do this article. This is going to be, this is what I'm going to do. And I have no idea what the sound is. And I kind of pull up a couple of plugins or turn on some of my hardware synths. What it ends up being is always the simplest thing. Like it's never like sometimes you'll get people suggesting, it's 3 layers. There's 1 layer for the top bit and then there's layers. But at the end of the day, it's pretty much usually just a preset. It could be like a DX7 preset. It could be like one of the really easy to program mono Juno sounds. It's always very simple. And I kind of like to keep things on my site very simple. There's no like 20 steps, 10-minute long videos to get one sound. It's usually just, I think a lot of the times you can't imagine bands sitting in the studio spending like 20 minutes twiddling knobs. A lot of times it's just like the sound that's there, easy to get to, that's being used. So I've just got to kind of figure out what that was.
That's funny. It's patch 7.
Yeah, pretty much.
Cool. Well, maybe I can ask you, as we get started here, just tell us like a little bit about, your background in music and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started as a guitar player, and I'm still a far better guitar player than I am a keyboard player. I did a music degree where I kind of focused on performance and jazz performance. So from that, the only really transferable skill to what I'm doing now was my ears. I did a lot of ear training. I did a lot of transcribing music, transcribing solos to kind of progress as a guitar player. So that set me up with like very good ears. I can transcribe songs or figure out what they are on a keyboard or on a guitar quite easily. Towards when I started playing guitar quite a lot, I got very into gear. I think every guitar player goes through a phase where they'll have a couple of amps and then you start getting into pedals and that's it. So I started collecting a lot of pedals, a lot of fuzz pedals and a lot of reverb pedals. And that's kind of how I got into production. You get like a reverb pedal, you get a compressor pedal, you get an EQ pedal, and what does a compressor pedal do? And you end up kind of learning about one of the basics of music production, even though it's just a guitar pedal. The site's named after a guitar pedal, the Behringer Reverb Machine. Like I said, I got a lot of reverb pedals. I've still got most of them. I kind of downsized my collection when I started getting into synths to put some money towards some hardware synths, but there's still a couple of guitar pedals I can't bring myself to get rid of. I got 3 delay pedals now, and I need to get rid of one of them because I don't use them, but I can't bring myself to. I just love them so much.
What do you have?
The delay pedals, one's a Strymon El Capistan, and the other one's what's the company? Chase Bliss Tonal Recall, like really, really high-end stuff. I have a lot of Boss pedals, a couple of Electro Harmonics pedals. It's kind of weird that I don't use them more for the website, to be honest, because I think it's very, if you read it and you don't have that guitar pedal, you're kind of left out, you know. Whereas I find with software, it's much easier to get into, you know.
That's very true. It's all there.
Yeah, exactly. And I try and use the same pieces of software throughout my articles. So not every article is going to turn into, well, if you want to sound like this guy, then, you know, you need to buy this and this and this and spend like $1,000, you know. Like I try and just use the Arturia plugins because they're so broad. And there's a Tal plugin for the Juno, which I use pretty much every article because it sounds so good.
Yeah. That is a nice one, the Juno one. I think that's just such a great synth, personally.
Yeah.
A friend of mine has the Juno 106, and he was...
Yeah, it's the one I've got.
Yeah, okay. So he was kind enough to let me use that for a little while. And I just remember the first time I had headphones, I put it on, and I just felt like, boom, I'm in a whole like time machine, you know? It just first it took me back in time, but then, you know, I just got lost in it so easily. There was something about it. A little bit of hiss in there, and
it's that magic chorus button.
Yes, yeah, that was definitely a big part of it. It's just there's something special about that one for sure.
Yeah, so the first article I did for my site was Tame Impala synth sounds, and that kind of started. I mean, I'd been doing a lot of soft synth stuff and kind of trying to figure out what sounds were which. But then I bought the Juno 106, and I love Tame Impala. Obviously, I listened to the Currents when it came out pretty religiously. And I bought the Juno 106, and I recognized a lot of the sounds off the album were just really easy to set up. You know, like sawtooth wave, bit of sub, and then the chorus. So they were very, very easy if you kind of just knew which synth it was. But you can't get those sounds on, if you have a DX7 and you're trying to get those sounds, it's impossible, you know. Or if you have a Prophet, it's going to be harder because you don't have that magic chorus button. There's not the hiss. It's not the inherent character of the Juno. But when I got the Juno, I found, you know, it's quite easy to get the Tame Impala set up because that's what he uses.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, Tal has a emulation of that chorus, don't they? Like, it's a separate plugin.
Yeah, they do. I don't use it that much, but they do, and it's pretty much exactly the same plugin. Like the things you could do with it, like to run a guitar through it, or you know, run another synth through it. But also the Juno has the oscillators are so bad, you know, they're digital, and I think it's just the mixture of like kind of plain sounding digital oscillators with that chorus. Which works so well. But yeah, you're right. You could run a Prophet through it, and that'll sound like something completely different, or a guitar through it, or a piano through it. You know.
Yeah, that's always the fun.
Yeah, exactly.
Out of their context. So when did you start the site?
Just over a year ago.
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna say April 2017.
Yeah, because you've got quite a lot on there already, considering it's only been a year.
Yeah. I think it was a pretty ugly free WordPress template. I kind of didn't think it was going to turn into a regular thing, and then kind of as time went by, I kind of kept putting it aside and then coming back to it and writing more articles for it, and then eventually I decided, okay, I'll get a little bit more serious about this.
Right. Yeah, and it's definitely nice. I mean, your design's great. It's clean. It's easy to navigate and find stuff. You know.
I had a lot of fun with the design.
Yeah, as a guy that's trying to do a website too, you know, I like to hear this. Like, oh, this looks really nice.
Yeah.
Do you do some of the art for it too?
Yeah, I do all the art for it.
Really?
I mean, unless it's an album cover, and the album cover's kind of just cropped something else. But there's a couple of 3D synth illustrations on there. I do them myself. I don't know why. I think it's just something I got into and wasn't intended for the site, but then I figured, you know, I could use these.
Yeah, they're really cool looking. They look like almost like little toy versions.
Yeah, I like that as well.
Like a keychain almost or something.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. It's not a bad idea. If I run into hard times, I can start selling synth keychains.
Right. You get like a 3D printer or something.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that's nice. So I have to imagine, you know, this must take some time, because I'm thinking, you know, as a guitar player too, this is how I started. A lot of
no way.
Yeah, I started guitar at like 14 years old, I come from like a rock background, and which is why
Same.
that's why a band like Tame Impala is so appealing to me, because they've kind of taken two things that I really like, which is like kind of like indie rock, and mixed it with like crazy synth stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's definitely right up my alley. But I'm thinking, like, you know, as I was learning guitar, I did so much figuring songs out off the radio, off of CDs. And it was, especially in the beginning, extremely hard just to ever figure out, like, what note is this, you know, what chord are they playing? As I played more and more, you know, you start to recognize the patterns, of course, and stuff. But you said you had some training, you said with jazz, right? So
Yeah, did a music degree.
yeah. So how does that help you with doing this stuff? Do you find that transfers quite a bit?
Not really.
Not really.
No, the jazz thing, not really. I mean, it set me up with very good ears. In jazz, the most important thing, if you're playing live and you have that improvisational aspect, is to listen to what the players around you are playing.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, as a guitar player, the way you learn guitar is, as you said, you play along with a CD, or you play along with a solo, and you slow it down and you figure it out. And that's the way you learn as a guitar player. And I think that's how I got into synths. Rather, I kind of listening to other records and kind of playing my synth along with it and twisting the knobs and seeing if it could get it to sound closer like what was on the record. I think that's where kind of it came from.
Was your degree in jazz?
It was a more open, I think it was a contemporary music performance, but the tutors there were just very clearly like all jazz guys. And I fell in love with jazz for a while and was like, this is what I want to do. And then, of course, I graduated and was like, oh.
Okay, that's cool. Well, it's a different, I'm sure it's, even if maybe not obviously, you know, on some level, it's got to be fueling you a little bit and getting you by.
Yeah, of course. I did a lot. I played as a kind of guitar player for a while. And it's like touring bands and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And I did that for a while and I had a lot of fun. But then I got to some point and decided I want to do something else.
Right. Yeah, I've had a little bit of taste of that too. And it is fun, but it's also grueling. And
yeah, grueling is the perfect word.
Yeah.
Just you feel yourself just tired all the way through.
Yeah, I mean, I think the longest I was away was just over 2 weeks. And that was enough, to like understand what it's going to start to do to me.
Oh man, I did like 4 months, 5 months,
okay,
stints, stuff like that. Yeah. Man, you get to this point halfway through where you've been out for like 2.5 months. You have 2.5 months left, and it's just like no end in sight, you know?
Right. Yeah, I could sort of imagine it. Like, you know, a week into our tour, we were still excited and having a great time.
Yeah.
It wasn't until like our poor nutrition and things like that started kicking in until...
Yeah, that's another thing. Like you stop sleeping as much as you would back home or eating as much, and before you know it, you're just sick all the time.
We booked everything ourselves. There was a really awesome site. I don't know if it's even around anymore, but it was called Book Your Own Fucking Life. And it was just...
I never heard of that.
Yeah, it was just like a website where you, as a band, you just like say, hey, I'm in the New York area. I'm looking for shows. I'm willing to trade shows. I'm traveling here. And basically, you just like hook up with people through email.
Yeah.
And you would just say, hey, I noticed you're in Baltimore or whatever city you're going to. Any shows during these dates you can get me on. And it was a pretty cool community. Like we did a couple different tours doing that. But all the times we're like, we can sleep on the floor, no problem.
Yeah.
The third night
part of the allure of it.
Wait a minute.
I know, and your back starts killing you, and you're like, oh. What kind of guitar did you play, or do you play still?
I'm like rock kind of guitar, but you mean like the actual guitar?
Yeah, exactly. Like a Les Paul guy or a Strat guy.
I was always more a Fender guy.
Fender guy, yeah.
So I do have a pretty decent Strat. It's the Fender 40th anniversary Stratocaster.
Okay.
That they made in 94. '94, which was right when I started, pretty much early. Yeah, and that guitar is a really great guitar. But my kind of like guitar of choice lately has been either a Mustang, Fender Mustang, or I've got the Fender Jagstang that Kurt Cobain kind of like put together with the Jaguar and the Mustang. I just really love two things about it. For one, the whammy bar area, the bridge, you know, it's the floating, I think it says floating vibrato on it. And what you can do just really nicely is you can just kind of take your wrist while you're playing and just kind of give it a little shove and just get these nice little, like, you know, pitch bends and stuff.
Kind of like My Bloody Valentine.
Yes, yeah, like
nice. I've always wanted to get into that. I've
the surfy kind of thing.
Yeah, never. I mean, I used to, but not for a while. I had a guitar with a floating bridge, so I've never been able to do the My Bloody Valentine thing. But I absolutely love that band.
Yeah. Same. Yeah. Yeah. So it's also a smaller scale guitar. So
yeah, I've never had a smaller scale guitar either.
Well, the guitar I really learned on it's a Gibson that my grandfather gave me. He had it when it's an acoustic. He had it in the 60s, and I guess he played a little bit, but kind of put it down because it was a small guitar and he had trouble getting his fingers in the chord positions. So my grandma almost sold it in a garage sale a number of times. And it's like the greatest guitar. It's this little acoustic guitar.
Still got it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's
nice.
That's like the house is burning down and everyone's out. What are you going to grab? It's probably that guitar. You know, it's sentimental values too. But it's a small scale guitar too. And I think I just got used to that. You know, so that's kind of where I'm at right now. I like that like kind of punchy, twangy sound.
Yeah. I wanted to buy a Fender Jazzmaster, especially the white one, the Olympic white one. I wanted to get the reissued one. I was looking at this a couple of years ago, and the price just went up.
Oh, yeah.
At one point. I say at one point, like after Brexit, I'm here in the UK. So after Brexit, the price of all American guitars went up. So that kind of put me off it for a little bit, and I still haven't gotten around to it. So I'm thinking maybe a Squire, just to kind of keep me going.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like maybe the Jay Mascis, he has one. The guitar player from Dinosaur Jr. He has like a signature one, which is meant to be quite good. So I might check that one up.
You know, it's Squire. It's like, you know, the lower class Fender. But I think guitars are funny in that they're all a different piece of wood. So
I mean, at the end of the day, I'm going to run it through so many pedals.
Yeah, that's that
what
too.
does it matter, you know?
Yeah, but I find like I've played Squires that are, you know, total garbage, but I've played some that were really nice and sometimes better than Fenders. It's just, you know, they're all as much as like they kind of standardize the process, they're still a different piece of wood, and I just think you never know what you're going to get until you play it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's actually what happened with the Mustang I had. I thought I was getting like a 1968 or something Mustang, and I bought it on eBay, and the thing came in the mail, you know, and it's like wrapped up in bubble wrap, and I open it up, and I'm looking at the case, and it's this like nice tweed case. I'm like, wow, this case is in great shape. I was like, oh, it must be a new case. Then I opened the guitar up. I was like, whoa, man, they took great care of this thing. And, you know, after like a minute, I was like, oh, wait a minute. There's no way this is. So it turned out it was a reissue. But I later found out that they actually kind of put a little more quality into the reissues.
I like reissued guitars.
Yeah, because I think the original Fender Mustangs were like learner guitars. Like they were made to be cheap. So a lot of them don't hold up. But, you know, I was initially disappointed. You know, I thought I was getting one thing and got something else, but the guitar was just, I love the way it plays. Yeah. So, you know, at the end of the day, I was really happy with the guitar. And, you know, I didn't want who cares?
Who cares what it says on the headstock, you know? Like,
exactly.
People aren't going to hear that. Yeah.
You don't hear that at all, right? That's something I think we can easily get caught up in when we do, like, you know, music production. We really harp on, like, you know, the EQing or compressing of like one little element that
Yeah.
most people don't even hear.
Yeah, exactly. And especially to do with the whole Squier versus Fender thing, I think synths, especially now with software synthesizers, you can really get stuck in some debates, especially on the internet, about hardware versus software. And I've never really cared for that, to be honest. I use software on my website because obviously it's so much easier and it's so much more accessible to beginners.
Right.
I don't want like some beginner to stumble upon my website thinking, you know, how do I want to form a band or I want to record some music that sounds like this guy. How do I do it? And me to be like, well, you need to spend at least 10 grand on synths before you even think about it. Because like a lot of synths are expensive, you know?
Yeah. And I think especially when you're young too, like it's very easy to fall into this like idea of like it's so unattainable and inaccessible. I mean,
some are still for me. Like I'm doing an article on the CS80, kind of trying to dive into some songs that we used on it, apart from Blade Runner, because that's the one that most sites only talk about. But I've never played a CS80, and that's still like I dream about it. But you know, I'm never going to own one because I can't justify spending that much amount of money on one synthesizer, you know, that I'm never going to tour with because I'm too afraid of it leaving the house.
Yeah, I've seen one in real life.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
And it was like, do not touch.
Do not touch.
It was off limits. But yeah, like when I was younger and when I started playing guitar, and I think part of the reason like it really hit me was I never knew if I had a guitar, I could play the songs I heard on the radio on it. Yeah. I mean, I was 14 and it just never occurred to me. So the idea of being in a band was just like, that wasn't even in my possible, like, you know, I've just as well become the president in the United States or something.
Yeah.
I mean, but when I realized that, oh, you could do it and you can do it on any guitar, it opened up the whole world. And I think today, especially like kids coming up will probably see like a lot of the hype around different software, different hardware, like you said, and think you need that one thing when, you know, they've probably already got enough right in their cell phone.
Yeah, exactly. So I did a piece on Frank Ocean, and I did an insane amount of research for it, because obviously he works with a lot of different people, a lot of different producers. But I ended up finding a forum thread that the producer of Pyramids kind of was in, and he kind of talked a little bit about what he used. And obviously Pyramids was such a huge song. I mean, it's 9 minutes long. John Mayer turns up and plays a guitar solo on it. It was probably one of the biggest songs off that album. But the synths in it are software synths. Not all of them. But the arpeggios and the bridge, he said are Arturia plugins.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, if he can make, you know, Pyramids by Frank Ocean with software, I'm sure you don't need to buy, you know, the latest, biggest gear to make a hit.
Yeah, that is very true. I think we have this like kind of hobby where it really does romanticize every new thing that comes.
It really
in.
does.
I mean,
it really does.
Just before we hit record, I was looking at your microphone, and I'm like, oh,
yeah.
And I've got a decent microphone, you know. It's there's nothing wrong with it, but still, I'm kind of like, ooh, you know. And I've done that before in the past with people on the show, and just like, oh, what are you using? I really like the way your recording came out.
But did you say that because of the sound of my voice and the sound of the mic, or did you just look at it and were like, man, I could add this one to my collection?
This time, I saw the mic I was looking at on the internet. So
okay,
it was before you said anything. I was like, oh, he's got the SMB. So
that's a good one.
So I was like, ooh, yeah, I've been like kind of scoping those out. But there was a time in the past I spoke to Underbelly, and I didn't even know what he had, because he had like the windscreen, you know, on it.
Okay.
So but then afterwards I was like, hey, what were you using? Because he sent his recording over after.
Yeah,
and,
it sounded good. Nice.
Yeah, when I put it next to mine, I was like, oh man.
Well, in which case I think it's justified to maybe, you know, kind of think about buying his microphone. You know, if it works and you like the sound of it, then absolutely do that.
Well, I
As long
also
as
found that it had like a little more presence that I was able to kind of, manipulate into my mic and make them
yeah,
kind of stand up to each other better. But, initially I was like, oh,
yeah,
pretty funny. It's so easy to crave like the newest thing. And meanwhile, like all
yeah.
the things you have are gathering dust or
I know,
hiding in your hard drive somewhere.
I know. Yeah, it's so easy to buy stuff as well. So easy to just go on eBay and make a bid, and then kind of worry about whether you should have made that bid after the fact.
Right.
But especially on eBay, where it is like a bit of a competition,
Yeah.
Man, yeah, you can easily buy stuff.
Yeah, well, you get into that competitive mindset and
Yeah,
you
exactly.
kind of forget like what you're actually doing. You just want to win.
Yeah. I'm a little bit lucky in that I don't have enough space to get all the gear I want.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I've got 3 big keyboards. I had a DX7, but I got rid of it just because I did not have space for it. And eventually, like, it was always propped up. It was never plugged in.
Mm-hmm.
And for a DX7, you really want it plugged into some effects as well, like a chorus and a reverb. So like if I wanted to play it, I had to like get it out and put it on a stand and plug it in and then plug all these effects in, and it'd take like 10 minutes and I could never be bothered, especially when you have like a DX7 plug-in on your laptop.
Yeah, yeah.
So eventually I looked at it one day and I was like, okay, it's time. I'll sell it.
Mm-hmm. I
I just
got you.
didn't have the space for it.
I've got a DX7, but it's not working.
Oh,
It's
really?
not just taking up space. Yeah, I'd made a pack out of it, a whole bunch of Ableton Live instruments. And I actually ran some. I think I forget if I did it at the same time or not, but I recorded some of them through my guitar amplifier, and then all of them you can either play them the amplified versions or the direct versions.
Yeah. Nice.
So yeah, but like not long after that, like I had a lot of trouble with that thing anyway. I think I might have had like a battery issue going on.
Okay.
So I'm thinking one day maybe I'll, get it repaired or something. But
Yeah, I think I've heard about battery issues with the DXs, so maybe that. I mean, it's digital, right? So it's.
yeah,
I mean, if there's not that much that can go wrong with it, I assume.
yeah, and like you said, there's a lot of other good options. Even I've got the what is it, the Korg, the little DX Volca, the Volca
Oh
FM.
yeah. Volca FM. That's
Volca
the one.
FM.
I used to have that as well.
It loads all
I
the
think
patches, and I think it sounds
Yeah.
great. I mean, it's only 3 voices at a time, but I really like it a lot.
Yeah.
I
Do you plug it with? Do you play it with a MIDI keyboard plugged in?
Yeah, usually like push.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'll record little sequences, but usually I'm just kind of using it like any old synth.
I think I used it just purely for the sequencer, which was ridiculous.
Yeah.
You could do some really weird things with the sequencer. I quite like that.
Yeah, those are cool little boxes.
Yeah.
They're like a thing I want to get more of one day.
Yeah, me too. But then I'm like, okay, maybe save up for a bigger one.
Yeah, gotta calm down sometimes, right?
Exactly. I used to have one of my more ridiculous eBay purchases was a very old Moog. It was the Prodigy, the Moog Prodigy, if you've heard of that. It's the synth that the band Prodigy named themselves after. But it's like genuinely an old analog synth. It's not one of these not a modern analog synth where all the oscillators are like, they stay in tune.
Yeah.
It's like an old analog synth, and never again. Like people get so romantic about old and analog, and man, it would not stay in tune. Everything would drift. Not in a nice way, not of like the pleasant kind of drift people talk about. It was just a pain.
like this thing's broken drift.
Yeah, like I don't know if it's broken or if it's just how this is meant to be.
Yeah.
So I parted ways with that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think there's something to be said about like usability. I mean, it's hard enough to just, like you said, you had your DX7. All you had to do was plug it in, hook it up.
Yeah.
And I mean, sometimes that's too much.
Yeah. But plugging it in and waiting for it to tune up, and then pulling out a guitar tuner and plugging it into it and opening it up and twisting all these. No.
Yeah.
Because then it's like, that's the thing with being a guitar player as well. Like, I assume if you have an acoustic guitars are so wonderful because you just pick them up and then that's it. you're playing, as long as it's in tune and they're easy to tune. So you just pick it up and you play, and then it's kind of easy to get inspired like that. You don't have this like 10 minutes of like turning on your laptop and turning on your audio interface and turning on your speakers and something's not working. So now you've kind of like, before you know it, you've like taken your whole setup apart, trying to find like a broken cable or
you're under the table on your hands and knees looking for something.
Yeah, and then at the end of it, you're like, oh man, that idea I had, no, that's gone.
I know, that is true. And I really do try to like keep everything like ready to go pretty much at any time, but it's still, there's that, and it only takes a second, honestly, to like let that inspiration slip away.
Yeah, it's scary.
Yeah. I really do appreciate like the immediacy the guitar has for that reason. It's on the stand and now it's in your hand.
Yeah, exactly. And it's always the same, you know what to expect.
Yeah. Well, that kind of brings me a little bit in thinking about like what you're doing with Reverb Machine. You're doing like two difficult jobs at once, whereas you're not only figuring out what the chords are, what the songs are, the notes and everything, but you're then figuring out the sound. And I mean, at least with a guitar, you figure it out on a guitar, like there's one preset, especially an acoustic. But
it's a weird way of thinking about it, but it's true.
But how does that work out for you? Do you try to do one thing first? Do you have a certain kind of process you?
So the first thing definitely comes very natural to me. As I said, I kind of studied music, and as a guitar player, I learnt by ear before I studied music. So that bit's quite natural.
Is that the figuring out the notes part?
Yeah, the figuring out the notes. So that bit I kind of do first. I'll kind of make a couple of Ableton projects for the songs I want. And I mean, sometimes I'll start with more songs and cut them down because I won't be able to figure one out. Or I'll kind of figure it out, but it's not as good as I want. So I'll make a couple of Ableton projects. I drop the songs into the Ableton projects and kind of line them up with the tempo. And I can kind of use that as a reference track as I go by, which is kind of my second point. But yeah, the first step is I put the songs in the Ableton projects, learn them, and then play them. So I kind of got the MIDI data in there. And then the second part, which I might not do on the same day, because the first part's quite easy for me. The second part is sitting down with a good pair of headphones or my good speakers and kind of having a bit of time to kind of play and kind of experiment. And then I load up some sounds, and my first guess usually isn't the right one, like say I'm trying to figure out the specific keys synth for a certain song. I'll try a couple of different patches, different plugins, and like I said, I've got that reference track in Ableton, so I can kind of quickly switch between them and see. Because sometimes you can kind of think it sounds better and it sounds good, but then you listen to the original and it sounds good, but it doesn't actually sound like the original.
Right.
So having a reference track helps.
Yeah, keep going back and forth.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of compare. And then it's kind of quite satisfying when you start getting close and you go back and forth and you can hear the big difference. Like the big difference is in the bass. This patch doesn't have enough bass, so you add some extra notes maybe in the left hand, kind of for some bass notes, or you make the patch a little bit weightier in the bass, and then you switch between them again, and it's really close, and it's quite satisfying. So
let me ask you if when you are trying to figure out like the notes part, do you have a process to that for anyone that might be interested in that sort of thing? I know I'm sure a lot of it's a little bit intuitive, but is there?
I'd say, like obviously as a jazz guy, my music theory is quite good. So I'd say my process is basically, I figure out the bass notes, listen to the bass guitar or what the bass synth is playing and kind of figure out those notes. Because then you only have to figure out one note as opposed to the whole chord.
Yeah.
And if you're holding a guitar, you can kind of play the bass notes on the low strings and kind of see, and you can kind of feel the vibration of when it's getting in tune if you're playing along. And then once you figured out the bass notes, you can kind of guess the rest. So you know what I mean? So like if you if the bass notes are C, D, E, G, then it's going to be a C chord, a D chord, an E chord, and a G chord. And then if you know your music theory, you know it's going to be a C chord, a D minor chord, probably, an E minor chord, probably, and a G major chord, probably, because then it's in the key of C.
Right.
Sometimes that doesn't always work, obviously, but that's a good starting point.
Yeah, so you kind of start from the bottom up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then as far as chord voicings go, like which C is it, especially on the keyboard? Is it like C, E, G, or is it E, G, C?
Yeah.
Listen to the top note.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see where then that starts becoming the trickier part. But that's actually a lot of how I would learn songs on guitar too, kind of figuring out the bass part.
Yeah, I feel like I did that so many times as a teenager.
Yeah.
That it's quite intuitive to me now.
Yeah, start from the bottom and build on top.
Yeah, exactly. And you experiment as well. Like sometimes you're playing along a guitar and just one chord just is not working. And you're like, why does this chord sound so awful? And then you experiment and you try out some different chords there. And then when you hit that chord, you're like, oh, that's the one.
Right. Okay, nice. And as far as like the actual synth parts, so you said you put some MIDI in first. Are you starting with like, are you starting on guitar? Is that how you like to be?
No, I don't start on guitar. I actually don't play guitar that much these days. I play guitar since when I record, and I do love playing guitar, but I don't play that much these days. But I still think like a guitar player.
Yeah.
So no, I'll play them on my MIDI keyboard.
Is this like a piano patch, or do you try to like?
Yeah, as a piano patch. Yeah. As a piano patch, or if I kind of think I already have a good idea of what it's going to be, then maybe I'll kind of load up a standard, I don't know, Roland Juno sound or a standard Moog sound, you know.
Mm-hmm. And then it's just a lot of figuring out from there, huh?
Yeah, and it's just sometimes it's just trial and error. Like sometimes, like I feel like unless I already know like fully what instruments a band use, I'm always starting from scratch.
Right.
Even after having done 30 or so articles, I'm still starting from scratch if I do a new artist and I don't know what they use.
Mm-hmm.
Especially smaller artists. Like big artists, kind of everybody knows what they use because there's pictures of them in a studio and you can just look at these pictures online and you look at the keyboards they're playing and you look at the logos on them and you're like, oh, cool, I have that. Or I have a software emulation of that. Uh-huh. Whereas smaller indie bands, you kind of just have to figure it out. And that's just trial and error.
Yeah, so you can't rely on the research factor quite as much.
No, unfortunately not.
Yeah, right.
Because that's nice. You get bailed out sometimes. You know, you can't figure it out and you find a documentary and it's just exactly what it is. It's just there in front of you and you're like, yes.
Yeah, I was watching and looking at your page with the Trent Reznor, Atticus Ross stuff. And I had seen some sort of, I don't know if it was a whole documentary or just like a little kind of mini, YouTube video or something where Trent Reznor's taking you in his studio. And I recognized from your article and from what you were writing some of the pieces that they were using.
Yeah.
So
I mean, still it's a guess. Like, I'd seen an interview where he says there was a Prophet 12 in the studio. He says he likes the Prophet 12. There's photos of him using the Prophet 12. I still don't know if he actually used the Prophet 12 for those songs. I'm kind of doing a little bit of a jump there. But, you know, you listen to the versions recorded in the Arturia Prophet synth, and they sound close.
Yeah.
So you deduce that.
Right. Yeah, well...
And until I get proven wrong, anyway. And another documentary comes out, and he's like, no, I didn't use a Prophet, only this. It was just in the studio.
Yeah, well, I can imagine, like, if you're not taking notes, I mean, I don't always take notes on what I'm using. I listen to stuff that I've been working on maybe a couple months back even. I'm like, how did I do that?
Yeah, I've been there, especially when you start using a lot of effects.
Yeah.
Or even guitar. For me, it's open tunings. Mm-hmm. When you record a guitar part with some weird tuning and you come back to re-record it on another guitar, or just you want to record it differently and you just cannot figure it out.
Yeah, where was I?
Yeah.
That's funny.
Then you end up kind of transcribing it again. It's like you're learning a song off a record, but it's you.
Yeah. Oh, I've had that many times, trying to figure out my own music so we can play it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember how to play the song. That's funny. So you've got one thing that I think you've kind of inspired me with the site too is a lot of like the effect processing, like your angle on the way you get these sounds. Often, you definitely think like a guitar player.
Yeah, absolutely.
As far as effects go. So yeah, maybe you can tell me a little bit about that. Like, what are you finding? Like any kind of patterns, any kind of interesting techniques people are using, or that you're finding that are helping you get some things, some of your sounds?
The most interesting thing for the Tame Impala stuff was I did some research for a guitar article on him, Kevin Parker. I never did the article, but I did some research on his pedalboard because he gets some insane sounds. Like if you listen to it live as well, it's exactly the same. And he basically runs his pedalboard backwards from what most people recommend. Like most people recommend an order of pedals, and that can be an order of effects also in your DAW in Ableton that you put in to get like the cleanest signal. And that's generally like a compressor first, distortion after the compressor, and then a reverb after the distortion. So that you know your signal gets distorted and then it gets put through the reverb, and the reverb's nice and clean. But what he does is he puts everything backwards. So he starts with the reverb. Like so his guitar hits the reverb and it's a big reverb. And then after that, his guitar hits the distortion. So his original guitar and all the reverb added on both get run through this distortion, and that just mangles everything. And then at the very end, he's got a compressor, which is like the last place on a guitar pedalboard you normally put a compressor. So then everything gets compressed and sustained. And it's just not what you're meant to do as a guitar player, but it works so well. So I found that kind of helps. And it's such a weird sound, but compressor after reverb. It doesn't have to be distortion. It can just be compression after reverb or compression after delay. It's such a strange sound because you don't really get that from one box. You just need to know. Just put these backwards and it works.
Right, and that's going to really, the compressor after the reverb is going to really manipulate the way the tail of the reverb works.
Absolutely.
That
it's
fade
really,
out kind of gets lost.
Yeah, it's weird because the fade out is suddenly at the same volume as everything else.
Yeah. Yeah, you can get some like kind of crazy sounds when you do it inside the DAW, and you kind of manipulate the reverb tails and try to pull them up in volume by compressing or adding gain and things like that. And sometimes you get like weird noises and sound effects that you wouldn't expect. Aliasing, I guess. Maybe that's the word. Things like that anyway, you know, the digital artifacts.
I think delays, especially tape delays, like really dirty tape delays. I don't have a tape delay, but I'm a huge fan of a couple of guitar pedal delays, which I mentioned before. The Strymon, Al Capistan is very nice. But for software, it's definitely the Sound Toys Echo Way plugin, which I know I'm not the first one to rave about. And I'm not being paid to promote it. But it's definitely for me one of those desert island synths. There's so much you can do with it. Like one thing being to turn the mix up to 100% and turn the delay time down to 0. So that's not even a delay anymore. But then you can get some really weird sounds by making it like a 15 millisecond delay and turning the feedback right up. So like every 15 milliseconds, the original signal is being repeated. And it just sounds kind of surreal.
Yeah. Yeah, the shimmering kind of extended sound.
Yeah, exactly. And I find I think Echo Boy is just one of those plugins that just always sounds good.
Yeah, I've played around with it a little bit. Don't own it, but it is very cool. And it's like you said, you kind of you can go through presets and just be like, ooh.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice.
Exactly. It's so fun to play with as well. And they did a mini version of it as well, which has less functionality but the same sound, so it's kind of a little bit simpler. It's quite nice. They did a reverb as well, like really not to like rave about them too much, but they did a reverb like this year, maybe end of last year, and it's only got 3 knobs and it sounds incredible. It's like a plate plugin.
They released that for free. I think
It was free at the time.
yeah, I think I have that one.
Yeah, Little Play. It was free at the
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
But I think it might now be a paid plugin.
Yeah, I think I've got that in my inside of like the new collections in live. I've got that like
Yeah.
one of my collections is called Try Me, and it's like
Yeah.
all this
Check
junk.
it out. Check it out.
Yeah.
That's one of the plugins I put on every track.
Yeah.
Just like a little bit, just like very subtle, but I find that just makes every track sound a little bit better.
Yeah, I kind of hear you on like the reverb and delay stuff because every single one is different. You know, they're all their own thing, something special that you know, they just have their own sound. And it's very easy to get caught up in all different versions and flavors.
Yeah, it really is. One thing on my to-do list would definitely be to do some articles on reverb and delay. Like, I don't know how long I've been running a website literally called Reverb Machine, and I haven't done an article on different types of reverbs. But that's definitely on my to-do list.
Yeah, that sounds like it's destiny right there.
Yeah, my biggest obsession, kind of when I was collecting pedals, was definitely the reverse reverb. And that's going back to My Bloody Valentine, actually, because that's the My Bloody Valentine sound. You were talking about the whammy bar earlier, but the other part of it is, at least for some songs, the reverse reverb.
Okay. I didn't know that. That's cool. Some of their recordings are just so fuzzed out. It's almost hard to tell what you're even hearing.
Yeah, that Loveless album's a magical record, like for me.
Yeah, that, I mean, it's almost like
that's an
one
album.
song in my mind. You know, the whole thing is just
Yeah.
yeah.
It's one of those albums that sounds completely different depending on what you listen to it on. Like listening to it on speakers is a completely different experience from listening to it on headphones.
Yeah, that's for sure. You had me listening actually last night to Tame Impala on headphones, which I've done, but not like as like the only activity I'm doing. Maybe I'm like going for a run or something. I've got it on, but like I was just sitting there listening to it because I was going through your page on it on the different sounds, and I was just like and it was really nice because something I really like about them is they've got this like really like together sound, like where like everything kind of almost bleeds into each other.
Yeah.
Yet, it's also when you listen close, especially with the headphones, like you can really distinguish things nicely too. So it's
a very, very well produced album.
Yeah, it's a really nice balance of a whole sound, yet when you really get to it, you can really differentiate the different parts nicely.
Yeah. I did. So I've been doing articles for reverb.com, not Reverb Machine, but also reverb.com. I think the next one that's coming out is on MGMT. That's going to come out in 2 weeks. A little bit of a plug there. Not really. But they have the same producer as Tame Impala. So I kind of got to revisit that kind of style, and it's so hard because everything is so compressed and so not distorted, but like saturated, you know, when it's just on the verge of breaking up. And there's also he does some like really aggressive EQing. So like sometimes if you look at people talk about EQing online, they talk about be gentle when you EQ and it'll sound nice and natural, you know. You use like really gentle slopes and really like small notches. But the Tame Impala MGMT sound and also the Flaming Lips sound is like really aggressive EQing. Just everything has a very, very strict space. And I quite like that. It's kind of, again, against the norm of what people will tell you to do as a producer. Like the guitar just cut off everything above what you need to hear and everything below and then run it through some distortion. But it's an amazing sound.
Yeah, you're right. Never really thought about that, but there's a similarity. You know, I didn't realize the same producer. I never looked into that.
Yeah, Dave Fridman. He didn't produce Currents, which was the last Tame Impala album, but he produced the first 2 Tame Impala albums, and you can definitely tell, like Kevin Parker on Currents was kind of following that same style, that same sound.
Right. I'm a big believer in like the sharp cutoffs of like with guitar especially, and it was like a weird revelation for me. Like I would bassy, thick guitars, so I'd always boost the low end on the board or whatever. But I I started really spending a lot of time watching like the spectral analyzers and frequencies,
Okay.
and I'd learned that anything below 80 like the low E is basically 80 hertz on the
Yeah.
guitar, and I was like, wow, I got so much information still under there. Like I really don't need that, and I started just aggressively cutting guitars, and I was able to get them to just sit so much better, and
Yeah.
despite maybe the naturalness on solo, they might not sound as good as I want them to, but within the context of a mix, it made a huge difference.
Yeah, and I mean, they don't have to sound good soloed.
Yeah.
I mean, if like, say you've got a song and you've got 8 tracks and they all sound good soloed, that probably means they all sound very full.
Yeah.
But then you've got 8 very full sounding tracks all
Right.
playing together. That's not going to sound nice.
That's
So you want them all to sound thin, because then when you put them together, they kind of make a complete picture.
Yeah, I find myself, I mean, I used to do every sound solo first and then get it right and then do my mixes and wonder why I was all muddy. But now solo is really more just like for finding problems, what's that weird buzz? Can I get that out? Kind of thing.
Yeah.
As opposed to like, I'm going to craft the sound until it's so beautiful.
Yeah, exactly. Make every track soloed sound like a masterpiece.
It's so weird because you have to make so many sacrifices in the mixing process.
You do, and then you're kind of like, man, what if anyone ever hears this? And there's like no bass at all and it sounds so thin.
Yeah, it is funny. It's like you have to know like what parts to cut out and live with it until it starts coming together.
And a lot of the times it's quite not what you'd expect, Like for bass guitar, you think, oh, it's a bass guitar, so I'll just cut off everything above 300 hertz. That sounds awful, You need some it's weird. It's like bass guitar, you need treble.
Yeah.
Because that's the bit you hear, you feel the bass, but you really hear the treble. So you kind of got to figure out, you want to cut the mids, and then you figure the mids are where so much stuff happens that the bass isn't kind of allowed. Well, I mean, it depends on your style, but for me, I find if I cut the bass there, it kind of adds a lot of breathing room.
Yeah, and I think that's like a way I think about it. I try to give everything a space to live and breathe. Like this instrument needs a little space, so we got to get something else out of the way for it.
Yeah, you give it a little zone, like you were talking about the spectrum analyzer. Kind of give a little zone on that, and then everything has its own zone, and they all kind of slot in nicely next to each other.
Yeah.
In practice.
Right. A lot of my favorite bass sounds they do have a lot of treble. Like a Tame Impala again really has a great bass sound. I always think of Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys. It's like just such a cool bass sound. And it's
I tried to get that bass sound. I think I did like a little audio bit of the song Yes I'm Changing. I wanted to record bass along with it, and I did, but I used my Fender P bass, and I was just because he uses like the viola bass, like the Paul McCartney viola bass, and they sound awful unless you want that sound. Basically, because they can just do that sound.
Yeah.
But man, it's impossible to get that sound on a P bass.
Yeah, they have this nice like punch through the mix. Yet, they've got the bottom end, but it doesn't kind of last the same way.
Yeah, it's a very weird sound. It's amazing what he uses it for.
Yeah.
And it's also weird because I think I considered getting one once, and I looked at some reviews, and people were like, "Do not get a viola bass because they're only good if you want to sound like Paul McCartney. They can't do anything else. You can't play heavy rock music on it because it's so thin. You can't play funk on it because it's just kind of got that weird frequency."
Yeah. Well, he's got like a Paul McCartney kind of thing going on where he's happy to like do melodies on his bass, and it works well.
I always love that.
Yeah.
I always think of that Joy Division song, Love Will Tear Us Apart, because the bass line in that is just a string melody.
Yeah. Yeah, it's cool. Like
I can't believe it works as well as it does.
Yeah. Yeah, because you always think of it as just like holding everything down, but it's nice sometimes when you can get a lot of groove out of it, a lot of like bounce, and I think that's a cool thing. I've never really worked with one of those Who makes those violin basses? I can't even remember. It's not Rickenbacker.
Hofner, I think.
It's Hofner. Yes, Hofner.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I've never had a chance to really play one of those that wasn't like kind of like a rip off or something. But
Yeah, I think the one I considered was just like a very cheap one. I think
Yeah.
it'd been like knocked down in price because it was somewhat popular.
yeah,
And I'm sure they're not anymore. This is probably before Tame Impala got quite as big as they are, and I'm sure they're not, knocked down in price anymore.
well, I think everything, right? It's just
Yeah.
as it gets popular, pops
Yeah.
right back up.
Yeah, especially with synths, buying like hardware synths. I don't know. You mentioned you have a DX7,
Yeah,
but you probably notice synths prices go up. What other hardware synths do you have?
yeah. I got the DX7 for like $200 with a hard case, like a
Yeah.
flight case. you know, like it was cheap. It was nice. Hardware. I've got. I got the Prophet 6.
Oh, nice. I'm very jealous.
Yeah, that was like. That was before I got married and before we got a house, and I felt like I had some cash.
Yeah.
I don't know how I would do that again, but I'm very happy I did. I've got this Moog Realistic one. It's like the Radio Shack Moog.
Okay.
It's a lot like the oh man, I'm drawing a blank on it. The name here, man, there's like a man, I can't think of it right now. But anyway, it was made for Radio Shack. It was like a consumer, synthesizer.
Yeah.
But I love it. I mean, it again, like this synth. When I remember I was at the Brooklyn like synth fest they do, or
Is it called the MG1?
yes, the concert
that's the one.
MG1, yeah.
Yeah.
They have another one that's like an actual Moog, but it looks very similar. It's different. I wanted to say it was the Prodigy, but it's not. Anyway, it's got a polyphonic like voice on it.
Okay.
And,
That's weird.
And yeah, and you can't really do anything to it except filter it. But it's got a couple different tones, and the noise on it is just like the best. And
Yeah.
mine is like breaking in the right way right now. Like it's got these weird little sliders, and they crackle, and they they're noisy when you move them. But
Yeah.
it's I have a feeling in like a year or two it's gonna be unbearable.
Yeah, but for now it's kind of the magic.
Yeah, there's like a kind of like sweet spot happening right now. Other than that, I got the MS-20 Mini,
Okay.
which I love. That synth is just blows me away. I mean,
Yeah, that's definitely on my my shopping list.
yeah, and that's come down. I paid a little bit more than it. I think I saw it for like $449 American dollars, and I
Yeah.
think I paid $100 more than that. But that's a beautiful synth, and I got a micro brute. I got a sub fatty, and OP1. OP1 is amazing.
OP1, nice. I didn't get on with the OP1.
You had it? You didn't like it?
I had it and I didn't like it. I mean,
Wow.
I kind of buy a lot of synths, buy a lot of gear, and then if it doesn't sit in my workflow, rather than kind of put it to one side and let it gather dust, I'm pretty frank about it. I'll just sell it and put that money towards something else. The OP1 I just could not get on with.
Yeah. Well,
I love it. I think it's so impressive as a piece of hardware, and I love the idea of it. But just the sound of it and the workflow of it and the recording on it, I never really got the hang of.
Yeah, it's very quirky for sure. I happen to just really like it a lot. The recorder is awesome for I demo like guitar songs on it, and it's got a built-in mic, and it's like a 4-track.
It's tape style, isn't it?
Yeah, and what's really cool about each track, unlike a real tape, like you would record over the track, but you can just keep layering stuff on track one. It's like
yeah, because that's what you do anyway. If you could have the option to bounce it, you'd bounce it, but the OP1 obviously saves you having to do that.
Yeah, and you can still do bouncing. You can bounce to a separate track. I love it. I mean, yeah, it's. I always say it's like one. It's one like if I ever lost it, I would get it again in a heartbeat. Yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah,
I think I had it quite early into my. I bought it quite early in my interest in synths, and I just found it so different and weird. But it'd be interesting if I got it again, now that I've spent so much time kind of noodling with synths and twisting knobs on synths, I think it'd be interesting if I got it again.
Yeah, it's definitely different than like say the Prophet. You know, it's
I like that. It's kind of fun. It's just got 4 knobs.
Yeah.
And the interface is so much fun.
Yeah, it's fun. It's like it feels like you're using a toy when you're using it, but it's very capable. So yeah,
I really love the fact you get visual feedback when you change the sound.
yeah.
I can't specifically remember what any of the synth kind of models on it are called or their interfaces, but I remember you adjust a knob and it doesn't even tell you what it is. You don't even know if what you're touching is like the cutoff or, you know, the oscillators, but all you know is you switch it, it changes the sound in this way, and it kind of changes the image on the screen in a certain way, and it's quite intuitive.
Yeah, it does. There's a lot of like weird like polygons, or like there's like an effect called like the cow, and it's actually like a picture of a cow that changes colors. And you're right, that's one thing I love about it, is you don't know what you're doing half the time. Like sometimes I mean, this is what I always wanted when I started learning synthesizer. I wanted to be able to like hear something and be like, oh, that's the high pass filter, it's got a high resonance.
Yeah, me too.
You know,
me too.
There's the envelope I wanted to, but now sometimes when I hear a sound or I'm making them, I say to myself, well, that's just the envelope filtering. You know, you start saying like it's just the modulation of the LFO, and it's at a synced rate, and you get so technical about it. But the OP1 is just like, I'm making this thing turn red, and you know,
I like the way it sounds,
and it becomes more of like playing and just turning knobs and exploring, and I like that about it a lot.
Yeah, I'd definitely get it again and give it another shot. I mean, I'm pretty sure I sold it for something as well. Like I sold it and I used the money to buy something else, and maybe I ended up liking that a little bit more.
Yeah, it's definitely not a, you know, what the hell? I'll just pick up an OP1 for.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it kind of
Yeah.
Feels like a toy, but you know it's not.
Yeah, you know. Yeah, I hear you on that. There's so many things to have fun with.
Yeah, but you said he had the Arturia micro boot as well. That was my first synth, actually.
Oh yeah, cool.
That was a synth I kind of just impulse bought while I was kind of strictly a guitar player, and I think I was in Guitar Center just to buy strings and picks and see if there were any secondhand pedals, and that had just come out, so I pretty much just impulse bought it.
Wow,
kind of
cool.
as something to do on the road and kind of have fun with, and I found it. Like, on one hand, fun, but on the other hand, I really had no idea what I was doing, twisting the knobs. And there was so much, it was so hard to find out, you know, like, I don't know. So I think that's kind of why when I started doing my own research and kind of figuring out sounds, kind of wanted to share it. Just because a lot of YouTube videos were kind of either like too technical or not technical enough, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Kind of finding like a nice middle ground where you're learning something, but at the same time, it's not just numbers. It's not like, you know, turn this knob to 4 and then this knob to 8.31 and, you know, layer these effects on.
Yeah, no explanation why or what it's doing.
Yeah, that was always the worst bit. Just like,
yeah, I went through a lot.
Step one, turn like cutoff to 8.31.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I did all my learning of this stuff through YouTube and trial and error, and there was a lot of like, okay, here are the settings, and I had no idea why anything was what it was. And it was definitely helpful to, like, when you found some information that was telling you why, what we're actually doing here. You know, I always appreciated that.
Yeah, I can't remember having a breakthrough moment, but yeah, just twisting knobs.
I think that's like
listening.
A nice little synth to work on for the first time.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially just, it's so simple. But having the physical knobs as well. I think before that I'd messed around with soft synths, but not seriously. But just having knobs and being able to put your hand on a knob, switch it one way, and you immediately hear the difference.
Yeah, I agree. And it's also nice that it doesn't have any sort of like patches or anything in it, because the knobs are always where they are.
Yeah, it's true. Just like the 70s synths.
Yeah. Like even the Prophet has, like 999 patches. I guess it's 1,000 patches. And every time you switch, the knobs don't move. So you have to like turn it to figure out where it is. But there is a button, the preset button, that turns off the preset, and it just becomes whatever it happens to be.
Yeah, like the panel settings.
Yeah, and that's really nice, like to have that. I mean, I had a Prophet 8. I had like the module.
Yeah, I've got a Prophet 8.
I liked it a lot, but I never knew where the knobs were, and I really didn't like that about it. Like,
I didn't like my Prophet 8 at first, actually.
yeah,
That was kind of my first big synth, and I found it very overwhelming. Like, but now I love it. Like,
yeah,
programming it at first I literally just used it for the presets, and I came back to it like after a while. Like the synth that really got me going was like my Sub 37, the Moog, just because obviously Moogs are just an absolute pleasure to play and to program.
Yeah.
And again, it's just one knob and everything. It sounds good in every position. Then my third synth was the Juno 106, and that's still my three main synths. And the Juno 106 is again such a pleasure to program. So I came back to my Prophet after all that, and just the amount of options is incredible. But you've got to know what they're doing. You know, you can't just go into the modulation options and start like twisting random knobs and expect it to sound good, because you could send like the envelopes and the LFOs pretty much anywhere.
Well, yeah, and you got,
which is incredible on a hardware synth.
Yeah, and you got the different layers of voices too. You can
yeah, I mean, I never really messed around with that, but yeah, that's very advanced. Like,
yeah, that's
like two patches in one.
Yeah, that was amazing. I mean, I really did like it, what it could do, but I found myself not really using it much.
Yeah, you get overwhelmed like with this sheer amount of options.
Yeah, so I did get rid of that one, and I think that went towards the Prophet 6.
Yeah, no, not bad, not bad.
Which, you know, I'm cool with. I really do love the Prophet 6. It's got the slop knob.
yeah, nice.
And
I love that.
It's just like makes everything less stable and less perfect. I love it. It's just like, it's just so cool. Like that you can have your cake and eat it too. You can get the problems with analog, but you can also turn them right off.
yeah, exactly. It's a wonderful age to live in.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially going back to, I mean, I did own a all analog synth, and I think I could do it again.
Yeah.
Unless it was an original mini Moog, in which case I guess, you know, if someone offered me one for free, I guess I would get over this.
You'd make some room in your place.
yeah, I'd make some room.
My buddy got the reissue. He got one of the reissues.
Oh, nice.
And it's beautiful. I mean, it's just
I've seen one.
It's a beautiful piece of furniture, even. Even if you don't play it just looks cool. But man, it is. I mean, and like you said, like the Moogs, like the knobs are huge. You know, you can really turn that thing and feel it working. Like, and I found like I was having such a good time with it. I had the resonance cranked up, and the filter knob is so big and so sensitive that I was able to like play melodies with like the oscillation of the filter.
That's incredible.
Over like I was playing like a bass line, but I was kind of like doing almost like a theremin melody over it with a little bit. Oh man, I was just like, wow, this thing is really cool, and I don't think you can get that kind of precision with a much smaller knob where it just doesn't have as much turn to it.
Yeah,
you know, yeah, that you know what I mean. It's out of the budget for sure, but you can kind of understand.
Yeah,
you know,
I mean, even if I have like my non-musical friends over, and they're kind of like, what do all the knobs do? Yeah. Typically, I'll turn on like the Sub 37 and just be like, just grab the big knob and give it a twist. And then they're instantly like, wow, you know, that's cool. Like, they don't understand why it's cool, but you just know it's something special.
It's a power knob right there.
Yeah, exactly.
It could almost be like a throttle, like for like a boat
I mean,
something.
Airplane. When I send Moog email asking if he can send me an even bigger knob, you know?
Yeah. Right, a big wheel. So you've I want everyone to know like a couple things that you're doing on your site. Aside from just like you know, dissecting songs and sounds and presets, you're also putting out like a lot of patches too for some pretty cool VSTs. You got like your Arturia, your Tal Uno.
Yep. I also recently put out a sample bank, which is probably something you know more about than me, but like an Ableton sampled instrument, if you saw that.
I see you got Ableton Sessions.
Yeah, so the one I'm talking about is So I have a Yamaha PS20 keyboard, and that's like all preset sounds. It's like an old electric organ. I went through and I multi-sampled that. It's the organ that Beach House use quite a little bit. They used to tour with it.
Oh, cool.
So I kind of, I couldn't find any VSTs that actually sounded like it. So I went through one night and I multi-sampled all 10 sounds and put them back together in Ableton Sampler. And I'd never done anything like that before. But not necessarily due to me, but just due to how good Ableton Sampler is. I found it pretty easy to kind of get all the long notes to loop perfectly, which was the hard bit. And then kind of just get a really good balance between the different notes. And basically, after I did it, I put it together in Ableton Sampler and kind of A-B'd it with the real thing. And I was really amazed at how good it worked. Yeah. So have been putting that up on the site, and people really like that.
Yeah, it is pretty insane what you can do with Sampler, and it does. I love it. I mean, that's the device I use more than anything.
I mean, I've never delved into it, but I was blown away by just how easy it was and how good it sounds.
Yeah, I mean, I've got quite a few collections of various synths.
Absolutely. You definitely know more about this than me.
It's just so nice though, like how you can have these sounds like ready to go. Like it's awesome having the hardware, but you don't always have your hardware with you. And there's a lot of synths that I don't own that I've multi-sampled, and like the Juno 106. I mean, I don't have that anymore. I had it for like 2 weeks probably, and but I've got it forever now. I just made a hell of a lot of patches with it in Sampler, and they sound great. Like it really does a nice job capturing that kind of thing.
I did another. So aside from that, I also did the preset banks for like the Arturia plugins. So one of them was the Arturia Mini. And that's a funny plugin because it kind of faithfully captures the Mini Moog, but then you click like the top of the interface and it opens up like this whole other section, which the Mini Moog did not have, like full on modulation and effects, a vocal filter, stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
But there's also it's called motion sequencer. So you get a screen, you draw a line in it with this little pen, and then you use that to modulate anything on the synth. And this blew my mind. I had so much fun with this. So you can kind of do like these little subtle dips and send that to like the tuning, and then all of a sudden the tuning is kind of like in tune, but occasionally kind of dips.
Yeah.
Or you can just do these like bizarre like diagonals and kind of send them to say like the cutoff or the resonance, basically any of the parameters.
That is cool.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah. See, that's where like I mean, obviously, like the whole analog versus digital thing is a debate people have. And there is something to having the hardware in front of you, but you just cannot do that kind of modulation on the hardware. Like that's out of the question.
Absolutely. Organ sounds as well. Bizarrely, I found the Mini Moog plugin. I mean, obviously, they had a polyphonic capability to it, but I found it sounds amazing. Like just because of the fact they modeled like the Mini Moog oscillators and the filter, it basically sounds anything. Keyboard sounds like a Wurlitzer sound or like a fake organ sound. I found it sounded amazing for everything. So I kind of tried to make it as diverse as possible. I think usually if you think Mini Moog presets, you think of basses and leads, and that's it. Whereas this one is like, it was pretty much a lot of pads.
Oh, that's cool.
A lot of weird stuff.
Yeah, I've got the iPad, the one Moog came out with, the iPad app.
Yeah.
And it's nice, and it has the polyphonic option. And it is just like, like some nice pads, that nice growl. I think it sounds really good. I was impressed. I didn't have it next to a real thing, but I'm not getting polyphonic sounds on a real thing anyway. So
yeah, exactly.
And that's, I think, where a lot of the fun comes in, is where you can sort of go beyond what the original could do. And that's what I like about doing the Ableton Live stuff within Sampler, and then you start throwing on the effects, and now you're capturing a pretty good idea of what the synth is capable of, but now you're just taking it somewhere else, to have like a a polyphonic, whatever you want, any Moog that whatever you're sampling is great. Like, you can't do that on the real thing, and that's where I think that's why I don't get the argument. Why is it an argument? Like, you don't have to pick a camp and stay there.
I know, yeah. Like one is one thing and the other is clearly another thing.
Yeah. So, I do get it. If you looked, I obviously have a thing for hardware too, but why not embrace everything? Well,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think sampling, like you said, brings up some pretty interesting possibilities.
Yeah.
Like, especially to do with, like, for me, I think my favorite things to do would be to apply pitch bend, like gliding between notes of just instruments that should absolutely not meant to be pitch bent or
Right.
glided. Like,
Yeah.
you could take like an organ or like the human voice and start applying some like weird pitch bending stuff to it, and then you end up with really weird sounds.
Yeah. And that's like half the fun, is like seeing like what kind of weird sound you can get out of something.
Yeah, exactly. And then you're trying to confuse people. Like, you want your listeners to listen to it and just be like, what is that?
Yeah. I mean, I that's a thing I love, like, about music, is when I can hear something and be like, whoa, what is that? Like we were saying before, like, if I can hear, well, that sounds like the cutoff set, like about 6,000.
Yeah.
Like, it gets, it takes a little bit of the fun out of it. It's, do you have that? I mean, you have like a deep understanding of theory. I know sometimes for myself, even if I recognize, that's, that particular chord progression, the 1-4-5 again, like it, like the like kind of like asshole nerd guy in my head, that's like everything's got to be some weird fancy thing that breaks some rule, but sometimes that does take away from my enjoyment of music when I start thinking that way. Do you have that ever? Do you deal with that?
That's an interesting question. So I'd say
like the magic is gone almost.
Yeah, like when, as a guitar player, when you're in love with this solo, like maybe it was Freebird for me. And like every time I listened to it, I was like, oh, this is incredible. I need to learn this. And then after you learn it, you go back and you listen to it, and all you can hear is like the fingering positions and the scales and the licks.
B
and
string,
kind of the magic
fret.
of the yeah, exactly. You've ruined the magic of the solo. I mean, you've learned something from it.
Yeah.
You've kind of ruined the magic of it.
Yeah, that's a weird thing.
So I don't get that too much with music theory or synth programming. At the end of the day, like, say songs that share a chord progression, like 1-4-5 or 1-5-6-4. There's good songs that have that chord progression, and there's awful songs that have that chord progression. When I hear the awful ones, I'm like, oh, this is terrible. It's tacky.
Yeah.
Or whatever. It's lazy, maybe. But then occasionally you hear good stuff with it, and then I don't hear the chord progression. I'm more in love with like the production or the vocal performance or the lyrics, and I'm not thinking, if the song's really good and really well put together, I'm not trying to take it apart. I can just sit back and enjoy it.
Yeah, and that is like a nice place. It's a nice when you can have both, kind of, when you can still be amazed at the, like, the craft of it, but then like just enjoy it on the emotional level too. Yeah,
there's some stuff I definitely don't want to take apart out of fear of, not being able to enjoy it as much afterwards.
That's funny. Yeah.
Especially, so Tame Impala, I've done like 3 articles, maybe 4 articles on them. And they released like 3 new songs as B-sides off Currents. And I just will not do a synth reproduction of one of them because I love it so much. A little bit of time's gone by now, but I still don't think I would. I just like listening to it and not kind of being like, oh yeah, I listened to this for like 2 hours, a couple of months, like 2 hours every day for a couple of months ago, like this one song, trying to figure out what it was. And now every time I listen to it, all I can hear is that.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. Yeah, it's sort of like going backstage for the magic show, and then you can't appreciate magic anymore.
You're like, oh, that was it.
Yeah. Oh, I kind of liked it better when it was like some higher power or something.
Yeah, but at the same time, the only reason I do this is so you can use what you learn in your own music
Yeah.
And I think that's how you grow, especially we both said we're guitar players. That's how you grow as a guitar player. You know, you just steal other people's licks, and you steal a little bit of blues, you steal a little bit of rock, and you steal a little bit of Pink Floyd, and you end up with your own style, you know.
Right.
So that's kind of how I came into synths as well. So I was like, if I want to make my own music, like my own synth music, I'll kind of listen to what I want, figure out how it works, and then I can take little bits of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that is a good way to build your own style and sound. And
yeah, and I think as long as you're not taking too much from the same place, as long as you're not like, well, I'm going to take my synth sound from this band, I'm also going to take their guitar sound and their drum sound, and you're not going to write songs like them. Then you get your derivative. You're going to sound like that band. But if you have like a broad music taste, you can kind of mix and match stuff with your own kind of existing sound.
Yeah, I think that's how I started, definitely emulating like specific groups. But then as you start doing that more and more with different people, now you're just like a weird,
Yeah, exactly.
like a stew of all these different things, and then it becomes its own flavor.
Exactly, because I mean, even like the bands that you love, you figure they got it from somewhere.
Yeah.
And you can sometimes go into like interviews and see if they kind of name drop any of their influences. And then you listen to them and you're like, oh, okay, that's where it comes from.
Yeah, and that's a great way to expand the palette too. Figure out like the people you listen to, what they were listening to. Definitely helps a lot.
And like going back to like Tame Impala, like there's a lot of like Led Zeppelin stuff in there.
Yeah, and what I find funny about that too is like, I mean, I appreciate Led Zeppelin, but I never really got too deep into them, even as a guitar player. Okay. I have nothing but respect and do enjoy their music. Don't get me wrong, but never got like heavy into it. But it's cool when you hear something like a band like that that's also pulling in other ingredients that you like, and then it's like, oh, here's that other thing that maybe you should go back and check out again.
Yeah, because I would never recommend Tame Impala to a friend and be like, they sound like Led Zeppelin. Yeah, because they don't. They sound nothing like Led Zeppelin. But at the same time, you can hear Led Zeppelin in their music.
Yeah, it's a cool thing, and I find that sometimes it changes the original thing in your mind a lot too, where like now like where it led, where it went to, and then you can go back and like, it's pretty cool how they were doing this then, and it's
exactly
blossomed into this new thing.
Yeah, so I think I did my last article I did was a Kanye West article.
Yeah, very good.
That sampled a Michael Jackson song. So that was interesting because the Michael Jackson song is like PYT is like easily my favorite Michael Jackson song. And the production on all the Michael Jackson songs are ridiculous. And some of the synths on it, because I mean, he had the money to hire the guys who were going to use like the top stuff. But it's kind of funny reading about the Michael Jackson stuff. Like the PYT, so you think about the chorus to PYT, there's this little like squiggly synth bend thing, and that was like two synths. That was like a Jupiter and a Prophet, kind of both big triggered at the same time. And that's why it sounds the way it does, because when they both pitch bend at like a slightly different rate.
Oh, cool.
Which is why the pitch bend on that sounds so weird.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. It's like like the real quick
thing. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's like the call and response thing.
Yeah. That's funny.
But that was kind of cool, going back to like Michael Jackson. And I mean, do I think of Kanye West when I listen to Michael Jackson? Not all the time. But it's kind of interesting how guys like him will just take music from anywhere and make it his own sound.
Yeah. Yeah, you know what? I mean, that's like what's kind of cool is like they almost like hide it in there sometimes. Like when I first heard that track, it wasn't like, oh, I'm hearing the Michael Jackson sample so much. You'd still feel like you're hearing something else.
Yeah, exactly. I think for me, I think I was really slow on the uptake that was PYT.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's like the chipmunky bit at the end.
Right. You can easily miss that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where I guess the sampling stuff is really cool when it's like its own new thing. And
especially when a song you like gets sampled, and I think you're either gonna love the new song that samples that, or you're gonna hate it.
Yeah, I think it's nice when it can sample it without really affecting the old one. There are certain songs like they get redone, and it's hard to ever hear the old one the same way.
Yeah, exactly.
This is, I guess, a responsibility that comes with doing that. But I'm usually, whatever. Say what you will about Kanye. He's obviously a controversial figure, but I'm always into what he's doing. He's always doing something interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Just all. Has he got 6 albums or 7 albums? Like every album is so special in its own different way, and you rarely get artists who you can say that about.
There's a good stamp on each one too. It's like, I know that's from that album. I'm there. He's really got something going there, and I remember when he came out with 808, and I was just kind of getting into like computer-based production stuff, and it was like, wow, this is really neat, This is because that album was like there was so many songs, like not just raps, like so melodic, and I love that about it. It was just really cool, really good stuff.
The one that got me into it was Power, which is a really crazy, because I love King Crimson. Obviously that first King Crimson album, In the Court of the Crimson King, was like one of my favorites. Probably still is probably one of my favorite prog rock albums. So when I was younger, I was really into prog rock, and that was one of my favorites. So then in like 2013, when my friend says to me, oh, the new Kanye West album's getting some really good reviews, I was like, I don't care. And I heard that, and that's got like the most obvious use. It's like literally the chorus line from the song 21st Century Schizoid Man, which is off that album. And I could not believe it. Like I just thought it was cool that Kanye West liked the same music that I did, but also that he would use it in such an interesting way.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I think he's able to like get a lot of different people that way too. But he's not doing it like with the gimmick in mind. If you ask me, when I hear it, it's not like he's doing it not just to capitalize on the popularity of the song, but to take it somewhere, to make something.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, sampling is like unnatural for me. Like I do sampling on the website when I'm kind of talking about sampling, where the sample came from, but I definitely don't think about sampling. Like I have a lot of respect for people that do that. Like kind of, have these records that no one else knows, and they'll chop them up and do something new with them, just because that's such a bizarre way of thinking about music for me as a guitar player and as someone who studied music.
Right.
That's such a bizarre, backwards way of thinking about music, but I got so much respect for it.
Yeah, it's not my go-to workflow for sure, but I've had a lot of fun doing it with just, I've got my record player here, and sometimes I'll just pop something on. I honestly like taking albums that I've never heard before. Like thrift store finds, like this has a cool cover. I've enjoyed taking like records that are like the sounds of Spain, like they're just like generic, like country music, like cultural stuff, and just like dropping the needle somewhere and just grabbing it, seeing what you can do with it.
Yeah, that's like the DJ Shadow sound, and I love that album as well. If you've listened to that, Introducing by DJ Shadow. Yeah, it's just solely made up of samples that he found in the basement of his local record store.
That's cool.
Yeah,
just letting kind of like fate help you.
Yeah, but it sounds so musical, it sounds so put together, like a band played it, and it somehow sounds very violent, but it's not.
Definitely a work of art.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, cool, man. I want to be respectful of your time, and I know we're getting near our end here. Is the best place to check you out just reverbmachine.com? Do you have anywhere else?
Yeah, just reverbmachine.com.
You putting music up
anywhere?
anywhere?
Social media thing. Not yet. That's something I'm working on. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I think lately I've been concentrating on my website.
Yeah.
Kind of pretty manically, if that's the word.
Hey, you know what?
But
it's good sometimes to just, because your site looks awesome. It's clean. It's
thank you.
Full of every single post on there is like a lot of work. I can tell you put a lot of time into it, and it's cleanly laid out, and it's very educational. I mean, people, you gotta be looking at this site.
Yeah, I hope it's fun as well.
Yeah.
I hope people that have never kind of made music find my website and realize, oh, you don't need to buy this, this, and this, and go to this school for 2 years. You can literally just, go to this website, drop, $60 on a plugin, load it up in a DAW, and, you're good to go.
Yeah. Well, that's nice to like, bring that to people. And I think even if you're not a nut like us, there's still like an interesting part to it if you're into music, to just kind of see how things are made and what the component parts are.
Yeah, I think my website is like the equivalent of taking a screwdriver to some electronic piece of kit, taking it apart and putting it back together again.
Right. That's a good way to put it. It's how it feels too.
Yeah.
But I definitely have found myself feeling pretty inspired listening to it, or reading it, listening to some of the pieces that you have. And it's really cool that you've got like the downloads of the patches too. That's nice.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, because that's how you can learn as well. You take them, you download them, and then you reverse engineer them, and you can mix your own patches or figure out how they work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for taking the time, and thanks for all the cool work you're doing. I'm excited to see some of the new things you're coming out with. You said you had something on Reverb coming up in 2 weeks we should look out for?
Yeah, so reverb.com got me to start doing articles for them. So I've done 2 so far, and I'm working on more of them. So I think MGMT.
Yeah, okay.
An article on MGMT is coming out in a while. Then it'll be Toro y Moi.
Oh, nice.
Which is a lot of DX7. It's pretty much his new album was...
Is that Bobo or Boo Boo? Or,
right? Yeah, Boo Boo. Pretty much all DX7.
I listened to that album probably more than anything last summer. It's like, and I just heard, I hadn't listened to it since the summer, and it came on again just the other day. I was like, oh, I'm like in 2017.
So I think that's coming out in like 3 weeks. Yeah, definitely check that out. And then Radiohead, which is what I've been working on a lot recently. Kind of, they use a lot of Mellotrons, Minimoogs, Prophets as well.
Yeah, I think they had the Prophet on stage in some video I was watching them playing. Which is cool.
Maybe.
Yeah, that's awesome. You got some good stuff coming up then.
So yeah, just kind of working a lot on the site, on the articles, kind of get everything I want to get done that I kind of feel like I want to write about out there, and then I'll kind of concentrate on my own music a little bit.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it for one, and I think anyone listening, if you're listening to this show, you're a certain kind of person.
Yeah.
So I think you're going to enjoy it too.
Cool. Thank you.
Cool. Well, thanks again for taking the time.
No problem.
And once again, this is, you're listening to my talk with Dan Carr of reverbmachine.com. Go check it out. And everyone have a good day.